All right, we're live. How you doing?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah. Well, yeah. I guess what I'll start this off with is anybody watching this should go to George's channel right now and subscribe. His stuff is great. And one thing I want to keep pointing out to people is it's so good to hear differing opinions. Like you might hear somebody talk and they might say something that you're really not into, and then you'll go, "Oh, I'm a vegan and they're a vegan, but I don't like that idea," and unsubscribe. I think the best thing you can do when you're wanting to figure out what things are good or moral is to be challenged by other ideas. So, George, I think you have one of the best channels as far as covering a wide variety of topics. And I'd say half the things I talk about because I get inspired by watching your stuff.
Well,
So,
thanks so much. I didn't know that. Yeah, thanks. That's good to hear.
yeah, definitely. How's your day going?
Good. Yeah. Yeah. As I was saying before the stream, it's nice and hot now in the UK. Summer's finally here, so the miserable weather is no longer, at least for however many more months until it goes back. And yeah, looking forward to good stuff happening this summer. We got the UK vegan camp out next month, so I'm really looking forward to that. You said before, Carson, you wanted to come to the UK, so you should definitely fly over for that one year if you can, because it's the best
Gotcha.
vegan event that there is to go to. It's an amazing event. So,
Awesome.
but yeah, all stuff has all been good with me today.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so let's just hop right into it. I watched your talk you did with it was a debate, old school versus new school, and it was on what's his face, David Rams. Um,
Mm.
oh man, separately at some point I want to talk about when the idea of everybody talking about their definitions on veganism came up. You were the only one that had an acceptable answer. Everybody refused to answer, and then even David said, "I don't think I don't think an answer is needed." And sorry, I just thought that was funny. But anyways, the thing that we're going to be talking about is on there somewhere in the comments of that talk. There was the idea of uh, taking an animal from a farm. I said I don't think it's good to steal an animal from a farm, and you thought I was joking, and so we're going to talk about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out my thoughts on why I think we should not do this, and then just have you go ahead and react to it. Okay?
Sure. Yeah, I'm quite intrigued to hear why on earth you could think that this is a bad thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, it's a numbers thing. It's completely a mathematical moral issue. Um, so I don't have all the details exactly of how farms work out, but um, farms must work something like this. A farm knows how much meat they can sell to various stores or to companies that will sell it to stores. And the demand will make them either have more or less. It'll be by weight or number. And so that's why it's good when we go vegan because we're not putting it in demand. Somebody says, "Why should I go vegan?" You're not putting it in demand, therefore less is needed. They breed less animals, so on and so forth. So that's how it must work. And so a thing I didn't think about until last night, thinking about this talk, is that there must be some kind of an effect where a farm decides how much they're going to have based on how much they end up with. So if they decide I need this much weight, and there's a likelihood of, say, if I had a farm that had 1,000 chickens, there's going to be a likelihood of maybe 25 of them dying, maybe a likelihood of five of them disappearing, so on and so forth. And based on the numbers at the end, if they met their goal, they're going to need to factor that in for when they produce their next amount. So if somebody goes in and liberates a chicken, takes that chicken, takes it to a farm, then that's one less chicken there. Now, it happening one time ever might not make a big deal. But if we're talking about if this is right or wrong, then we could imagine it maybe happening a couple times. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers would look like. But even if you had a farm that had like 10,000 chickens and you took 10 of them out, it's going to show up at the end. The math is going to pan out to where they're going to have to breed, whether it's for that season. I don't know if they call it a season of like how they work with meat, but then either the next time around they'll have to breed more, or as soon as they recognize it, they'll have to breed more. And what I would say is if we consider it immoral to breed an animal, then if an animal's already bred and we can take that one and it had a sucky first half of a life, but we can let it live the rest of its life out well, and that makes another animal be bred in its place, then the only thing we've done is we've caused the initial animal, in a sense, in a weird timey-wimey sense, that initial animal to be bred and have a half good life. Because the outcome of there being another chicken that took its place to be bred and have a miserable life and killed will pan out the same.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand. I mean, let's say this chicken who would have been liberated, they would have not have been liberated. That chicken would just be sold anyway, and then they're just going to see that as demand. So I don't see how liberating that chicken and actually causing them a bit of profit loss. Yeah, they're ultimately going to replace, if they notice, by the way, if they notice a missing animal, they're going to replace that animal. But that's just the same if that animal's to be sold anyway. There could actually be the argument that the animal not being liberated and being sold, it might make them actually increase the demand even more, because it's not like they're just replacing, what they see as a stolen piece of stock. They're actually saying, "Oh, this product is popular; it's selling." I mean, face it, there's
They
a
wouldn't view it
reason
as
shops,
selling.
but there's a reason that shops don't want you to steal their products. Remember, these animals are treated as like units of stock, as a shop would be.
Stealing the meat afterwards would be different.
I'm not sure I can see how.
But it would be barely different. It would still be bad.
Well, Carson, do you think a farmer would agree with activists liberating an animal? Because if it was as bad as you make it out to be, surely they would almost be wanting vegans to do this if it benefited.
It would be the only benefit to them, or sorry, the only benefit to us vegans doing it would be that the farmer who we view as a bad guy would be put out cost-wise a little bit, which could have an effect in our favor, but not enough that would outweigh the fact that we are causing a chicken to be bred into existence. But I think maybe the part that we might need to bring it down to a smaller scale. But imagine a farm had a bunch of chickens, and the stores that are going to, like a farmer having chickens that's going to butcher the chickens and then have all this chicken meat, they get nothing unless they can sell that to a place. So them having the farm is based on the demand. So if a store says, I need 1,000 pounds of chicken flesh, then the farmer will do some form of what they need to do to get 1,000. They might aim for 1,100. That way they can account for potential issues like vegans stealing chickens and chickens dying, diseases and that kind of stuff. And then that way they can end up with the right number. But if something causes them to need to change that buffer, then they will. So if they need 100, what did I say? 100,000? No. If they need 1,000 pounds of chicken, and let's just call a chicken a pound. So they have 1,000 chickens. They have 1,000 chickens. They need 1,000 pounds. So they probably need 1,050 chickens. But they are only deciding they need 1,050 because they don't want to go under the amount they have. And that's based off knowing chickens have died. If a farmer has never had a dead chicken or a stolen chicken, they're just going to have 1,000. And if their chickens start dying a little bit or people start stealing them, then they're going to go, okay, we need 1,005 or we need 1,010 as our buffer. So the farmer needing a certain amount and then not being able to reach it because somebody stole that chicken will just make them have a higher number for their next year. It must, right?
One thing I'd say is I don't think it's as noticeable as you're making out, perhaps. Remember, at these concentration camps where animals are bred sometimes by the millions at certain farms or by the thousands or whatever, yeah, they're always going to be selling a certain number of animals, but there's still going to be animals there at that farm. It's not like they sort of breed them all, then sort of sell them all off at once. And it's like, oh, we have to breed this many extra in reserve because this many are missing. But in any case, if they're already factoring in that chickens are dying, sheep are dying, this is something that I think they've already factored in anyway. I still can't see how there's going to be some kind of...
I think they'd have to factor it in based off the potential outcomes. So if a certain factory has 10 chickens stolen by vegans a year, then they might factor that in. And that's fine, but they would factor that in and therefore breed more. If you don't steal the chicken, they won't factor that part in. Now, if 10 chickens die of disease every year, they'll factor that in because they want to meet demand. If they're making a profit, they'll factor that in and they'll be like, oh shit, chicken got disease, I'm pissed about it, but I'm not just going to give less than the stores need. I want to reach what the stores need. So anything that leads to that. And so you could just play the numbers game. So if you went and stole one chicken, maybe it wouldn't get noticed. But if they have 1,000 chickens and you steal 500 of them, what's going to happen?
Say again, the last question again. If they have how many chickens and someone...
So they have 1,000 and you steal 500. Obviously, these higher numbers will make them just call the police, and the police will do an investigation, and you could never get away with getting another 500. But set that aside for a second. Let's just say you actually can be successful. So they get told they have 1,050 because they have a buffer of 50, and they get told they need 1,000 chickens worth of meat to go to the store to make their profits. They're going to make a ton of money off this, and you go in and steal 500 of them. So they're going to lose profits on half of what they have. What do you think they're going to do the next year?
I don't see how that would be any different as if they sold the chickens. In fact, I actually think they would just breed more if the 500 were there and they sold because they think, damn, this is profitable. The fact is, an animal liberation activist going in and liberating those 500 chickens, yes, they might do something to safeguard against that in some way. But that's ultimately setting them back. They do not want this to happen. Like it's very bad news for their business if a liberator goes in and liberates 500 chickens.
It's bad news for the business for sure. They don't get paid for that. So it's bad news for them, and it's bad news for the animals that are force bred that wouldn't have been bred.
But
because that chicken meat is still needed.
But don't we want this farm to go out of business? Don't we want them to?
If we can be so successful at it that they go out of business, which there are some farms that we wouldn't want to go out of business. There are farms that are killing animals that if we could snap our fingers and make them go out of business, we wouldn't want to. And we can talk about that in a second. But yes, if there was a really bad factory farm that you could get away with stealing so much that they just give up and they go, I'm not gonna do this business anymore and quit. That is the win. But if you don't get that, then no matter what, it's a lose. Because if they are making so much money, let's say it costs them $10 to raise a chicken its entire life, and they get $50 or something. I mean, this is a random number. It really doesn't matter. But let's just say they get let's do a different number. Let's just say that hypothetically they would get like 10 times what it costs to have it. Therefore, them the next year, like breeding extra to make sure that they get their profits. This would only matter if there's profits, but I mean that's what we're talking about, a profitable company. So if they losing a chicken getting stolen, they just go like, oh man, I don't want to keep losing these, but I only got paid for providing whatever percent, 90% of what the store wanted. I want to make sure that when it comes time for harvest, what do they call it? Not harvesting. That wouldn't be their word. That's our word. Time for slaughter. When it comes time for slaughter, that they want to have the maximum amount that a store will buy from them. They're going to do whatever they can do without losing profits. So if you steal if they have 1,000 chickens, let's say you don't steal 500. Let's just say they have 1,000 and you steal 100. They're going to make some profit, but they're going to lose 10% of their profit. So they're going to make sure the next year I get so much profit from this that I'm going to have this buffer even wider. I just can't imagine them doing it any differently. Like how could you as an animal owner that raises and kills animals not replace the stolen one?
But selling all those animals is just going to create more demand anyway. I'm again. I think I wish I was more skilled in number one maths and number two economics to push back against
Wait,
the exact
the
arguments you're
selling
giving.
doesn't raise it,
But
right?
it does, because that's how a business grows. So businesses, when let's say there was someone started off a farm and they were just breeding 10 chickens a year, if people kept buying from that farm and they had no stock loss, they were just going to breed more and more and more chickens. Us going in and liberating animals is just going to fuck up their strategy, and it's actually going to help shut down the farm.
No. I don't think they wouldn't breed past the demand, but also the amount they breed wouldn't cause extra demand.
Well, they would breed. That's how animal farms grow. That's how any business grows. It's loads more of people are buying our product. We're selling this. Let's create more products. So it's.
But it would only work if the people bought the product. So that's how this kind of thing works, is the demand comes first. That's why it's good to be vegan. You cut out the demand that you normally would have caused. Unless I'm misunderstanding something, this would be a case like, let's say I owned a company that made pencils, and let's say in the US 1 billion pencils sold every year. If I make 1 billion and they all sell, I'm like, yeah, awesome. If I make 2 billion and 1 billion sell, I'm not making anything extra because I made extra pencils. If they have extra meat that nobody needs to buy because they made the more than the amount for demand, it would only cause extra demand if because of that they sold it for less or something weird, right? Like they're not gonna get more people to buy meat they don't need.
No, I don't know if we might be getting our wires crossed here or something, so to speak. But maybe I need, look, this can be my homework. Maybe I need to go away with more of a slightly complex understanding of how exactly the economic side of this would happen. But I think in any case, look, with your pencil analogy, for example, I mean, if a fire ravaged one of the pencil factories in Carson's Pencil Enterprise, that's ultimately a bad thing. It's not going to mean you're going to yes, you're going to make the pencils to replace those. But if the fire didn't ravage the factory, you're going to make pencils to replace those, and you're going to get more money from it anyway. And there's more long-term success for the business. Think of the liberation as almost like a fire at a factory, at the pencil factory.
Okay, so I make 1 billion to sell 1 billion. And one of the factories dies, and or gets burnt down. So I lose like 10% of that. I lose that much money. I have to make the extra, and then I've lost money. Yes, that part's good. Making, considering what we don't like about this, making that harm the person causing harm is good. The problem is when you make the extra 10% of pencils, that harms nothing. So the math works out. But then when you look at it as, if you burn down a factory, well, you don't have to burn down the factory of chickens, but essentially you might as well. Because when you liberate the ones you've liberated, that same number are being reproduced. But not if you don't liberate them.
Right. Let's simplify this. Are you basically saying that if activists liberate animals, more animals would be bred than otherwise would be bred if those liberated animals would have not been liberated and would actually be bought?
Yes. I can't see how not. Imagine, what if I had a backyard chickens and I was like having them give me eggs or whatever. Let's say I had 6 of them, and because I had 6, I got exactly the amount of eggs I needed. I sold them to some neighbors and stuff, and I had 6. If somebody comes and steals one of my chickens, I'm going to go buy a new chicken. And me buying a new chicken is going to be putting another chicken in demand. People are going to make more chickens to sell more chickens. But me not buying a chicken makes the revenue go down from the store. Yeah.
But that analogy doesn't work because you'd be buying a new chicken to replace a chicken who is never to be sold to slaughter. All farmed animals are being sold to slaughter, even on egg farms. But
Yeah,
backyard chicken thing doesn't work the same way.
No, I think it does. The outcome, the slaughter and the eating, doesn't affect it.
It does, because the chickens in your backyard egg scenario, yeah, if someone went into there and liberated a chicken, you're going to buy a chicken to replace that, and that's going to increase the demand. I understand, but with a farm, all those chickens are going to be sold to be murdered anyway. All you're doing is putting a dent in their profits by liberating a chicken there.
Nope, because you're adding the demand that wouldn't have been there.
But you're adding demand by buying chickens, because the more the reason 90 billion land animals are being massacred every year is because even on these small farms, which are no longer even small farms really anymore, so many people are buying animal products, not liberating the animals, buying animal products, that it's just making them breed more and more and more and more to meet demand. Because the more successful your business is, the more products you sell, the more units of stock you don't have lost or damaged, the better your business does, and the more you want to grow from that. I'm not, again, I don't know. There might be some slight flaws here in my argument, as I'm not an economist or anything. I'm not an expert on this, but I still I'm not convinced of your side here.
Okay, so I have 10 chickens in my backyard. I can breed chickens whenever I want, but I don't want to breed them unless I can sell them. I have people that are going to buy approximately 10 a year from me, and I have 10. If people buy 10, I breed 10 more. I sell that 10 the next year and the next year. Now, if I'm going to sell 10 a year, and I know I'm going to be able to sell 10 a year, and I can breed them whenever I want, but I'm not going to waste my time breeding them if they don't sell. If George came into my backyard and took one of those chickens to liberate it, and then I had 9, I'd go, oh, cool, that's all right. I'm going to go. I mean, it might harm me financially a little bit, but not as much as the reward I get from the profits. So I'm going to breed my new chicken. Okay, now I have 10 again. So I'm good. Now, that means that year I bred 11, where I would have bred 10. And if you come in and steal 2, I'm going to breed 2 more, which means I had 10 initially. You stole 2. You gave them a good end of their lives, but I bred 2 more. So now that year I bred 12. And I would have to do that if I want to sell 10, because 2 of them disappeared. So because of George, there were 12 chickens bred that year instead of 10. 2 extra animals that can feel and suffer and don't want to be bred into existence for this reason. That only happened because of George. Does that make more sense?
I'm not sure, but why, if someone bought 2 of those chickens, would you not breed 2 more?
If they bought 2 of them, then it would just change. The numbers would go up. If I knew I was going to sell 12 a year instead of 10, because normally, let's say I sell 10, and then 2 more people became customers of mine, and it's like, oh, sweet, I sell 12 a year. Okay, so I breed 12, and I'm going to sell 12, but George steals 2. Now I have to breed 2 more. So now I have 14 that I bred, but I can only sell 12 because 2 of them are living on a nice sanctuary, which is great for those 2, but it's not great for the 2 extra I had to breed to replace them. Now I could go, they're stolen, I'm not going to breed more, and I tell those customers, sorry, I can't do business with you. That's just bad for business, so I probably wouldn't do that.
But if someone kept liberating the chickens from your farm, you're obviously going to make a loss on the profits, and you're going to think this is a bad idea for business. And that's ultimately, that's many future generations of chickens spared. So this is financial damage to the business. And I'm still not getting the maths with if you're selling these chickens, you're ultimately going to be breeding more to replace them.
Yeah, so let's say I knew 10 people that own, I mean, chickens are small, so people eat more than 1 a year or whatever. But imagine like a cow. A cow is so big, a person that eats meat could survive on a cow a year, right? So let's say I
Hmm.
had 10 cows in my backyard, and I had 10 customers that they don't like to get their meat at the store or whatever. They just want to get the ones that I breed. So I have 10 and I have 10 customers, and every year the same 10 customers are going to come to me. I slaughter these 10 cows. Each customer gets a cow, and they have it for a year, and I'm only going to see them the next year. I think it's easier to bring it down to smaller numbers. If while I was on vacation, George came into my backyard and was like, "Oh, I'm going to get one of these out of here," and you got one of the cows out of there, and I came home and I'm like, "Oh, I have to have 10 to sell this year. I breed one extra cow, and now I have 10." So that year in 2023, because George stole one, then in 2023, 11 were bred. 10 of those 11 will get slaughtered and sold, and one of those is living on a nice farm. Now, if George did this 4 times that year, I would breed 4 extra. 14 would be bred, which I'm guessing like 14 is worse than 10 as far as breeding animals pointlessly into existence. Now, 4 of those will be on a sanctuary farm while 10 are slaughtered. But if you never stole any, 10 are still going to be slaughtered. So, yeah.
In your analogy here, are you? I hate maths, but I'll just ask a question.
Yeah.
In your analogy here, is it that this little Carson's backyard farm of 10 chickens that you're running, or 10 cows, whatever it is, are they all sold for slaughter at the same time? You breed 10 for 10 to be sold, and
Um,
then
Yeah, I mean, it would vary. If the new one that was bred couldn't get to full size in time, I'd probably have to tell my customer like, "Hey, I'm going to get it to you a couple months late." Or I would look at it as, okay, now that I notice I might have an animal stolen, or in a different case, an animal gets sick and die. I need to sell 10, so I'm going to breed 12. I'm going to breed 12, sell 10, and then I have this buffer, but I would need to increase the buffer based on the likelihood of me needing more cows.
I think when we're talking about the actual farms that activists go in to liberate animals, what's happening is you have many hundreds or thousands, whatever, of animals there, and liberating one doesn't really affect the system in any way, in other to just dent the profits in often in an actually unnoticeable way.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they sell these animals off to slaughter, they just pack however many there are into a truck all at once, but there's however many hundred or thousand still remaining there at the farm. I think with
Mm-hmm.
these analogies you're making about you have this exact many animals, I think they rely on the assumption that they're all sort of, it's almost as if they like magically appear and then all go to slaughter at the same time, and then
Mm-hmm.
exactly 10 replace them or something like that, when that's not really how farming works. You've always
Mm-hmm.
got a surplus of animals there at the farm anyway, because they actually only send a small percentage of those animals off to slaughter at once, because the rest of
Mm-hmm.
them are all at different ages.
Yeah.
um, but ultimately, I still think if what you were saying was true, farmers would almost, if stealing it, or liberating, should I say, animals from farms breeds more, farmers would like secretly love this. They would like be secretly wanting activists to go into the
Well, no,
farm,
because they
liberate
don't
an
get a
animal.
benefit from it. They lose the
But
profits of they lose whatever they put into the one you stole. That's the only thing they lose. But no, they wouldn't secretly love it, because that's the thing. It might seem like, since I'm saying this will hurt animals, that it'll benefit farmers, because we view farmers as they suck and they don't want animals to do well.
but
Both of
if
them
you
lose.
but if you're saying they breed more because you liberate one, those
Mhm.
more that they're breeding are going to be sold to slaughter, which just
It,
makes them more profit and
not
would
more
make them
profit.
more profit.
No. They're breeding it to replace it, so it's the same profit. If I sell 10 and you steal one and I breed an 11th in, I'm still selling 10, so I make the exact same profit. I just lose whatever amount of finances it took to raise the one you stole. That's what I lose.
Yeah, I'm still.
Yeah. No, it's all right.
This
I mean,
is
we get.
some Yeah, this is something I need to go away and research more. I'm obviously I'm obviously skeptical of the argument that liberating animals from concentration camps would be anything other than a good thing.
Well,
So, but I
let's look at a sadder case. What about monkeys in testing? If there's
yeah,
a building that has 100 monkeys that they do testing on, and you can imagine the worst testing possible, it doesn't matter. I view this as probably worse than a lot of factory farming. If they have 100 in there and they do their tests and they replace ones when they need to replace them, if you go in and you sneak in and you get a key and you take a monkey out, and at best odds you figure out how to get that monkey to a reasonable place to have a sanctuary, which let's just assume you magically can, that company that does research is going to need another monkey. They're gonna steal them from the wild or breed them into existence. If something is needed, then stealing will make it go back. Even in the worst case scenario, you go steal a slave to free a slave from a slave owner back in the day. Now, I'm not saying I would have the emotional ability to not free the slave, but if I could free them and magically get away from it, I have to remember they're replacing that guy. And they're probably, with slaves, breeding that replacement.
so wait, so you would say even at the time of human slavery in the States, whatever, that even liberating a slave from a slave plantation would be a bad thing ultimately.
It would be at very least immoral. I don't know if I do it or not, but I usually, it's my analogy I use for pet owning. I usually refer to the idea of if a slave was up for sale and I was a billionaire and I had no interest in slavery, I thought slavery was horrible, but I saw somebody being sold and I looked at their eyes and I go, I'm going to buy that person. I buy them and I tell them, hey, I'm against slavery. I can't really free you because of how our situation is, but you can live at my house, have the best food. We're going to be best friends. Would this be a good thing to do? And the answer is no, because demand, again, if you did that, that one person would be having a great life, but they would go and see, okay, how many did we sell here? We sold this many. This is how many slaves we're going to bring back. And that's why even if you treat an animal well, buying an animal at a store, if you go to Petco, you guys don't probably have Petco or PetSmart. So. Okay. Well, anyways, if you go to a pet store and buy a dog, you might be buying that dog because you think somebody else that would buy it would be a horrible dog owner. But you buying it tells the store, okay, let's get more puppies from the puppy mill. Let's breed them. So yes, essentially, I think it's morally wrong in all the calculations. But I would probably try to free all the slaves.
Yeah, I mean, let's skipping over all this math stuff because this is what I'm terrible at. This is like the worst. This is the thing that I'm the worst person in the world at is the maths and the economical stuff. Yeah. So why don't we look at this from a Kantist philosophical standpoint? Now, if we take your position to its conclusion where people have this idea you have, versus if people take my position to its logical conclusion, ultimately, this is going to be a good thing for farms in the long run if we take it to your conclusion, because ultimately what's going to happen is there's going to be the idea that liberating animals and affecting the profit losses and rescuing those individual animals is some kind of bad thing. And that's just going to help farms profit in the long run and stay in business. Now, if loads and loads and loads of people take on the pro-animal liberation philosophy, this will ultimately dent the profits of many, many farms in the long run, liberate many, many animals. Even in the short run, if you say mathematically it will breed more animals, it will just be in the short term. But think how many concentration camps we would ultimately shut down because, number one, it's dented their profits so much. Number two, people actually, it becomes seen as a bad and evil thing to go into animal farming because you're creating a culture where we're saying these farms are ultimately slave plantations, concentration camps, and this is therefore an unpalatable thing for people to want to be going into. People don't want to be seen as like a slave owner or as a Nazi on a concentration camp. If we can create a culture where we see animal liberation as ultimately a good thing against an evil system, surely philosophy
Yeah.
here is the much better way forward in the long term, though.
Yes, but I don't think the stealing them will convince people of that. That would just be the aftermath. You have to convince them first, because I think the only people in favor of the stealing them would be us vegans, the people that already hold that philosophy. So yeah, I think you're right that if people looked at it like this, then people look at it like that. But stealing them, I don't think would make it. If right now there was some news article that said vegan went in and liberated all these chickens or whatever, then I'm guessing any non-vegan that saw that would just call that theft, and they wouldn't be a fan.
Well, yeah, they probably would say that, but obviously they'd be hypocrites because they love it when in
Oh, of
China
course.
they liberate the dogs, right, from the dog meat
Yeah.
farm.
Oh, they are
But
hypocrites. Yeah.
right, but okay, even not taking just the societal thing yet into account, the number of vegans is raising every single year. If every single vegan had your philosophy that liberating farmed animals was somehow a bad thing, that would
Mhm.
be ultimately a good thing for farms. Farms would love that. Whereas if that every vegan had my philosophy that it was a good thing,
That's
this would be, especially with the number of vegans that we have growing every year, this would be a very damaging thing for the animal agriculture industry.
Yeah, it could be, if done right, could be damaging. No matter what, it's damaging to animals. It could be damaging to the farms, and if it's done very well, impossibly well, it could be damaging to the farms so much that it has a positive effect on animals. But I don't think it would ever reach the positive effect. I really don't think it would.
Well, would it not reach the would it not reach the positive effect just like it would do in other justice movements throughout history? I mean, there were slave liberations at the time of slavery, and this was ultimately seen as like a good thing, and these slave plantations surely suffered as a result of it.
Yeah, they did. They probably did suffer. Overall, though, it would be interesting to look at the numbers. I don't know if they kept the numbers, but I'd want to find out if every time a slave escaped, if that if that slave owner got a new slave, because that would be what matters.
Yeah, but even in that analogy, those slaves would just die on the farm and they wouldn't get profit from that. With farming, it works different because these animals are actually sold off to slaughter. Now, so I'm going to make quite a controversial statement here.
I've never heard you do that before.
It's actually better to liberate a farmed animal than it is to liberate an enslaved human. Because from an economic standpoint, human slaves stay on the plantation for the whole lifetime. They don't get sold off to be murdered and eaten. Whereas with the animal cases, they do. So with the slave plantation argument, perhaps you could make this argument as well, now they're just going to buy another slave. Whereas in the animal argument, these animals are just being sold off to have their throat cut anyway. So all you're doing is you're liberating a chicken, stopping them from having their throat cut, stopping future babies that chicken has from hatching and also having the same thing happens to them. Will they replace the animal potentially if they notice, if it even is noticeable, which in the majority of cases, I don't actually think it is, because they just sell X amount.
At some point, it must be noticeable. Now, one, you might be
Yeah.
right. If you go to every single factory farm and take one, you might be right. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to look into it though. I'm going to call some farms and find out. I'm going to ask them in a sneaky way where they don't know they're talking to a vegan. I'm going to pretend I'm like a college student or a high school student doing a paper. Because I'd be curious. I'm guessing they need a certain weight at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And if they don't have that weight, they fail, and therefore whoever's hired to make sure they have that weight is going to factor in anything like runaway animals, disease animals, anything like that. And so I think the number would have to affect it. But you're right about the slave thing in a sense. I am not going to claim that I care more about one animal than one human. But you're right about the idea. It's the reason why we think dairy is worse than beef, is because that animal that animal is like living out its life. Like actually, and so maybe no. Okay, maybe I just figured out why you're not right about the slave. Because maybe we would want to rescue a dairy cow or a slave over a beef cow because of its extended torture.
Well, one thing I want to make clear is that the dairy industry actually is the beef industry. A lot of people kind of mistake them as separate entities. I know you said a moment ago, dairy is worse than beef, but dairy basically is beef, right? So they take a mother cow, rape her with a steel instrument. The males are sold off for slaughter, and the
Mm-hmm.
female, once they're done giving milk as slaves on this farm, they'll be sold off to slaughter as well. And this is the same process with animals. The wool industry is the lamb industry, for example. It's like when people think that wool is like this byproduct of lamb meat, but it's actually not. Lambs are bred as much for their wool as they are for their meat. So these industries, they basically are just the same thing.
Gotcha. Okay, well let's pause that topic there, because I think like you were saying, you don't feel comfortable with numbers, and so you might want to look into things further. I want to look into things further too. There's a couple people that I very much respect. Their logical thinking that are in the comments that I think at one point said they disagreed with something I said. And so I want to chat with them too. And then maybe we'll do a follow up on the topic. I'd be curious to hear what you think
Yeah.
later on down the road.
Well, here's the thing. Like, if you all credit to you. You've set up this live stream with quite a controversial opinion that many people, when they hear it, they'll be like, wait, what? Did this guy just say that or whatever? But if you do indeed have a point that it is somehow worse for animals when we liberate them, in the long run, if we liberate them, then this is something we would need to re-strategize on. I still believe that we need to do radical actions. But yes, if
Mm-hmm.
there is some, if if in some way it does actually harm animals when we liberate them from farms, then we would need to re-strategize how we're actually doing this. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you bringing up this topic. But yeah, as I say, I kind of wish I knew more on the economics, and I kind of wish I was way better with numbers than I actually am, because right now, I just don't think that we might come to a
Yeah.
conclusion.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we have to learn. I mean, I'm constantly trying to look into various different topics. But yeah, let me.
Yeah.
I have one other big. Well, first of all, how much time do you have? I want to respect your time.
I could go for probably about half an hour longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just do this next one real quick, and then we'll hop into the main one. So
Yeah.
earlier we were just talking about the idea of a farm shutting down, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Let's imagine. Let's imagine a farm that's like a free range farm of sorts. But let's say it's not just the label that we know they can get away with. Like, it's as free range as you can possibly imagine. So it's not typical factory farm. Cows, chickens, whatever are eating grass, roaming around. We can physically notice the difference between that and the atrocities that we see in something like Dominion. If you could snap your fingers and make that farm close down, would you do it?
Well, yeah, obviously, right? Unless you have some kind of.
No, I
Well, let's hear
do.
your counterpoint.
So here's the thing. If let's say that farm is selling their products to a subset of people that want that product, is people that are convincing themselves that it's acceptable to eat animals if they're treated better, which it's not, of course, right? It's not, but it's better. It has to be better. So if you snap your fingers and that farm disappears, we we could luck out, and hopefully all those customers of that farm would find another farm like it, put their free range stuff in demand, and make them increase their volume. But if they do not do that, and us closing down that farm makes those same carnists go and eat factory farmed animals, even though it might seem in the broad scheme of things like, oh, who cares? They're carnists, they're doing horrible. We would be causing more harm and suffering and increasing the demand in factory farmed meat products by closing down that one. I would snap my fingers and close a factory farm one for sure, but not anything better. I would close down the worst, but anything that leans towards better than the worst, I would have to not do so, I think.
Yeah, I think I understand this argument that you're making a lot more. With regards to things like Dominion, I think we should make clear that the the animals you're seeing in that aren't just from factory farms. This is the so-called local farming, and the whole local farming BS. I mean, we both know it is a complete scam, a lie, and there's a lot that you don't see there. And
Yeah.
I would actually say some of the worst murder footage and stuff that I've seen has come from these so-called local farms.
Gotcha.
Um,
So yeah, within the hypothetical, it would have to be one that we can recognize. Is like, so I watched Dominion, the opening 20 minutes for a conversation I had recently, and they show like the mother pigs locked in their tiny cage. They show the runts get slammed down. They show like all these various different things where they don't get to touch grass at all. They don't get out. They don't. Anyways, and they just they cut out the teeth. They cut off the tails. They do all this. So I'm just saying, if we imagine a farm that even if it's not great, the animals die at the end, they don't cut off tails, they don't cut out teeth, they don't lock them in this cage or whatever. They let them roam free and think they have this great life and they're going to get butchered eventually. But if closing down that farm with the pigs on grass enjoying themselves more than the suffering we see in Dominion, I feel like we must not snap our fingers and close that farm down.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Now, I think in a vacuum, your argument works. I think if you really take all these rigidly take into account all these hypotheticals and stuff, and we analyze it from the super utilitarian perspective, it's like, yeah, okay, you shut down this farm, and now as a result of this, the carnists who were buying from that farm are going to buy these like objectively worse in this hypothetical products from another farm. And we can take away all these things in the hypothetical. So like we can take away, for example, my point about the murders being more horrific often at these local farms. And then we're just saying in this hypothetical, no, this farm definitely, like in each case, the murders are like there is less suffering and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I can see in a vacuum why that argument would work. I think from wider societal implications, I don't see it as working in quite that same way.
Well, even if it wouldn't do something perfect, wouldn't you imagine that the factory farm I'm talking, or the free range farm I'm talking about, if you just closed it down, just your finger snap, it closes down, those products being sold, someone out of all the people that bought those products, at least one of those people is going to support more factory farming than they would have. I don't know if the numbers would work perfectly, but even one less factory farmed pig to one of this farm, I mean, every little bit counts, I think.
I think there's other variables to take into account here, though, as well, which is why I think your analogy works well in this strict hypothetical. But for example, if the people buying from this farm, the reason they're buying from this farm is because they're concerned about welfare, then technically when this farm shuts down, they're not going to up their amount of factory farming.
No, that's a fair point. Hopefully they would just go and get other stuff from another company. But I really don't know how many companies there are. I don't know if it changes depending on a town's like health food store having local stuff. And so there are it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I think I would have to not close it down if I felt like it was amongst the 50% of farms that were the best. Whereas maybe if it's anywhere in the 50% are the worst. Well, honestly, factory farming is like over 90%. So it'd be any of the 90% that's the worst. I'd probably shut any of them down.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at this from like, so both farming animals is oppression, right? Regardless of how it's done. And so is like, I don't know, sex trafficking, regardless of how it's done. Now, we wouldn't say in the case of like some grotty pedophile ring, well, we don't want to shut down this pedophile ring because the suffering of these children, is actually not as bad as, you know, these other paedophile rings. And
Mm-hmm.
if we shut this one down, its customers who buy the films and stuff that come from this paedophile ring, they're just going to go elsewhere, and these children might suffer
Mm-hmm.
more. Now, I can see, if you madly apply all these little hypotheticals, put it in this vacuum, you could, of course,
Mm-hmm.
make this like kind of argument. It's like, well, actually, you know, in this world where we do this, you know, actually, we shouldn't shut this down or something. But
Yeah.
the societal implications of not shutting this down would obviously be bad, and it does. You can see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, no, I
It's
see where
just
you're going, and in some of these hypotheticals, we'd have to see exact numbers, and therefore we are strictly talking hypothetical. I think with the farm thing, I don't think it. I think it seems clear that it must have some effect. But yeah, I think even with something disturbing like talking about like uh like sex work type stuff. Yeah, if you just have to look at the numbers. So if we have found out that since the invention of like internet porn and like OnlyFans type stuff, if since that sexual assaults on real humans has dropped because people, instead of going out and the R word I can't say on here, people, if instead of that they're just going on OnlyFans or whatever, then I would say if I could snap my fingers to shut down Andrew Tate and his brother having their OnlyFans operations, I wouldn't do that if the odds were that the people that would have watched those OnlyFans are just going to go out and do sexual assaults in real life or something like that. But we'd have to look at the numbers. But just because it sounds bad doesn't mean it is bad.
Yeah, I see you're looking at things from a strictly utilitarian standpoint here, I guess. But if the Tate brothers were trafficking women for whatever it was, I would still shut that down regardless of, you know, numbers or whatever was happening in society, because I think if there's something that's just an evil thing, that should be shut down. We shouldn't just say, well, shutting down this evil thing will allow more numbers of this to happen. We're trying to create a just world, right? Overall, we're trying to create a world with fewer rights violations. We're trying to create a world where it's conditioned into the psyche of people that these are all ultimately bad things. I don't think we should massively get caught up on, you know, calculations and figures of, you know, otherwise, if we look at it from this perspective, we can justify things like, you know, like, I don't know, the stuff that happened in World War II, because we have like radar now and penicillin. You know, I wouldn't say, for example, I wish that the Blitz, I'm glad that the Blitz did happen in London and all those people were bombed to smithereens, because we have radar now as a result, or something like that. And this has saved X many, I don't know, or penicillin, I think, came from World War II, and this has saved many lives. So whatever it was, I think there's a nasty story of how that came about. Maybe it was from like the concentration camps or something.
Well, let me cut you off real quick, because I am not a utilitarian in any sense of the word. If a train is going towards 5 people and I can make it hit 1 instead of the 5, I do not do it. If it's going towards 1 million, I don't do it. If it's going towards 10 cows, I don't switch it to get 1. I am not a utilitarian. I think the mix-up people have is people think there's a connection between welfarism and reducitarianism connected to utilitarianism, and it's not. Because here's the thing. Are you familiar with being like a deontologist, like being rule-based?
Yes, maybe that's what. So I'm not super versed in philosophy, but I think if I was, I think I'm probably a deontologist. I could be wrong, but I think I'm a deontologist.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. People in the vegan community right now are mixing up words, but even if I let some of that slide, the idea is, so a lot of people think a deontologist would say, I fight for animal liberation. I'm trying to get people to go vegan. Nothing else matters. If you're going for welfare or reducing, that's a utilitarian thing, because that's an overall calculus. And here's what they miss out on. Being a deontologist means, in a sense, means that you have rules. You have your guidelines, like you don't kill, which is why somebody wouldn't kill 1 person to save 5. And so you have this set idea of this is right, or this is wrong, and therefore I am standing strong on it. But what they're missing out on is the same thing works for any negative rights violation, in the same sense that it should be illegal for somebody to punch you in the face because they're harming you. That if it was legal to punch somebody in the face, we would want to make it illegal to punch them in the face, right? Because in the same sense that we wouldn't just say, I only want humans to be completely free or nothing. I don't want to give them all the individual things. So same things with the pigs. I might say, I want to work towards people like it being illegal to cut off the tails and teeth of pigs. And people consider that a utilitarian stance, but it's not. It's a deontologist stance of that's a rights violation to cut off their teeth. So if I can get the law, even though I want total liberation overall, until that happens, I want the law to say farmers can't cut their teeth and tails off. And so anyways, that's why that's deontology, because it's having this strict rule-based stance.
Mm-hmm. So what are you saying you are, if not a utilitarian?
I am 100% deontologist. Like most people are threshold deontologists, where they would say, I wouldn't kill one person to save five, but if it got up to like a million or 100,000, I would kill one person to save five. Like one innocent person. I wouldn't kill an innocent person for anything.
So
yeah.
I wish I was more versed in philosophy as well, but as I say, given the positions I've seen you make before, I'm surprised that you say you are a deontologist and not a utilitarian. I mean, even
I know what's in your brain right now, and I can tell you why.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. If somebody told me that they were going to kill either one person or 100 people or 5 people or whatever, and I had to choose who to save, I would say kill the one, not the 5. That's because I am having to pick between these. If it's already in motion, which there's somebody in here that I know what he's thinking already, that he thinks it doesn't matter that it's in motion. But like if a plane is crashing and there's 1,000 people in there and that plane's going to crash and they're all going to die, and some God being thing tells me, if I shoot this random stranger here in the head and kill them, all 1,000 people will live.
Yeah.
I'll say no. I'm really sad that plane's crashing. That's part of what's happening in the world. I didn't cause that. And even if somebody else did, it's a bummer. And I think we should fight to make it to where people can't make planes crash. But that person doesn't deserve to die. And in my moral take on things, I won't kill that person. But if somebody tells me, I'm going to kill 1,001 people, and if you tell me right now, just kill one at random versus killing 1,000 at random, I'll do that. I'd say, yes, kill one. Just kill one. If you're going to kill all of them, kill one. So with animals are suffering all over the world. If I tell somebody they should go vegan and they go, no, fuck you. And I'm like, can you at least cut down, do meatless Mondays? Because if you save one pig, that will make my heart happy. Because they're already going to die, not because I think it's acceptable to only save one.
So I guess you're a deontologist, but a suffering-based deontologist? Or is that right? Or?
Yeah, I mean, my moral stance is it focuses on negative rights, which would be rights that can be removed from somebody. And so like you remove... like removing somebody's speech. I think everybody should have their free speech. Removing somebody's ability to live, to not be harmed, all these things. Where a positive right is giving something. If you like positive rights, then you want to give somebody health care. You think you want to afford them this extra right. My moral stance is, if something is sentient and it can feel, then you shouldn't make it feel bad. And so my deontologist stance would cover anything involving that. Animals, humans, whatever. You don't kick them. You don't harm them. You don't fence them in. Which is why I'm against owning pets. You leave them to themselves. And outside of that, we create different laws to be able to function well and find food and whatnot. But you don't kill and you don't harm and you don't enslave. And that it's just across the board for me, and I don't have wiggle room there. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's all these like crazy ass head fucks you can do with the whole deontology, utilitarian stuff. Like there's the whole, even from an animal rights activist standpoint, from an animal rights standpoint, it's like, would you flip the switch to like prevent 9/11 if it turns out that 9/11, stopped however many hundreds of thousand animals being bred into existence to be murdered by the
Yeah.
people on the planes, or there's these crazy horrible things that
Yeah.
little thought experiments that you can come up with that are just like so horrible to think about, because it
Yeah.
really makes you it's really hard to give concrete answers on a lot of these things.
Well, I think a lot of utilitarians, they are utilitarian because they accept what is the moral right answer, not because they would follow through with it. You could say that morally it would be better for 9/11 to happen than this other thing, that you basically give the same amount of units of suffering and end of life. That happens to be a little worse. And the idea is just, are you willing to acknowledge that it's worse? But in a sense, it doesn't matter. It's fascinating to help you figure out how you feel about something, but yeah.
Yeah,
But okay, so if you got time, I do have one last thing I want to go over with you. Okay,
let's go.
I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this. Okay, okay, so I go into the woods. It's not really me. I'm just using me as the hypothetical. I go into the woods. I have a gun. I've eaten all the food I need to eat. I am the fullest person that can be. I've overeaten this day. Okay. And for the rest of my life, we know I am good on food. I don't need any food. I have all the food at my house and I'm never going to run out, and I can magically know this. Okay. I go into the woods and I see a tree with an apple on it. Okay. There's an apple on this tree. I don't need this apple. I have all the apples at home. A deer is walking up. And I'm there, and a deer's there. We're out in nature. A deer's about to eat that apple. I pull my gun out. I shoot that deer. I kill that deer to stop him from getting the apple. I don't want to eat deer. And I go and I eat the apple. Am I a vegan? Did I do an action that makes one not vegan?
Yeah, I would say that would make you mean you weren't a vegan. Yeah, you murdered an animal so you could eat an apple.
Okay. Okay. And so this is interesting. I'm glad I worded it this way before we started talking about crop deaths, because when I start talking about crop deaths first and then I say it, depending on which vegan I'm talking to, they'll go, oh, well, it's not vegan related. It's just immoral or something. But so here's the problem. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, you have to do what you have to do to survive. So even though crop deaths exist, I'm going to continue to I'm going to eat all the crops today. But here's the interesting thing, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this. I didn't need that apple, and even though I viewed that as a thing I wanted to consume, and I killed something for it, I would compare that to something like, I think it's reasonable for us humans to spray pesticides and do rodenticides, do whatever we need to do to kill rodents and birds or whatever for our food, because we need that food, so we're protecting our food. But not if we don't need the food. So
Yeah.
if we eat all the food and we're good to go, but then we eat something that we know, in the same sense that we can tell people the studies are in, you can be vegan and thrive. We also know that every diet, it doesn't matter if it's whole food, if it's carnivore, if it's paleo, keto, Mediterranean, all these diets, every professional in the world will say the same thing. Processed junk food, cakes, cookies, ice creams, all these things are unhealthy. They are not improving our health whatsoever. If we eat something like vegan ice cream or vegan cake or whatever, I think it's interesting and worth looking at. I don't think everybody is like not vegan if they eat it. But if there were rodents and insects, and then because of birds eating those insects that died from crop deaths, and we're consuming something that's not for our health, I think it must be somewhat comparable to shooting the deer that's about to eat the apple. And we should knock it off.
I see what you mean. Because are you talking now? I guess you're not talking here about product that we should be eating to get by to survive, in which there's always going to be like a certain amount of harm caused for civilization. But you're saying like
Correct.
for these products we eat just for like pleasure, like donuts and stuff like that, we're causing harm ultimately for pleasure. The problem is
purely for taste pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem is with this, where would this philosophy kind of end? Because every single little thing you do in life for pleasure is probably going to have some form of harm involved in this non-harm free world. I mean, you wouldn't be able to play a video game anymore because it uses electricity. You wouldn't be able to buy a battery. I know, I can see exactly what you're saying, but I still think there is when you're literally there murdering someone right in front of you, I see that as a very different thing from just like funding a system in this fucked up world that is harm-free, that is not harm-free. I see buying the vegan donut as the same as playing a video game and causing harm via electricity.
That's a fair point.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, let's go to the video game store, and there's one last video game on the shelf, and I don't know, and a rat is about to like chew the video game cartridge or something, and I shoot the rat. That would be a very bad action. But I don't think me playing the video game at home and then this electricity causes harm to like animals and the environment. I see them as kind of different things. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is different. At very least, it seems different. I don't know exactly how different it is, but yeah. So here's one that's hard for me to get around. It's the idea that like I think it's fine to cut down a tree to build shelter, even if that tree would have had like birds and squirrels living in it, because we're all doing what we need to do to survive. But the reason we're vegan is because we recognize the things we don't need. We don't need the taste pleasure of meat. So we're not going to cause this suffering to something we don't need. And so it's all on a spectrum. So deciding like, am I going to build this giant house that I don't need this big of a house for one person? Is this reasonable to do as a vegan? So it's kind of like that. And I don't think we should be micromanaging every action we do. You go to buy a coffee at the store when you could have sent that money to some starving child in Africa or something. We can't do everything. But when people on the street, and I'm sure you get this all the time with the street activism, that when people say, oh, there's all these other problems in the world, and I'm guessing your reaction is something like, well, this is something that we can easily do. We can easily just cut this out and protect all these animals where other things are complicated. And so I would say now overeating is kind of complicated, but something like knowing something for sure is unhealthy, like a vegan donut must be unhealthy. So not doing that, I think, is somewhat reasonable. Being 100 pounds overweight means that you must be doing something wrong. You must be causing more rodent death from rodenticides. So that person, as a vegan, I think should try to not be overweight for various different reasons. It's probably good for veganism to be a healthy weight. But also separately just from the actions that you're causing. But yeah, I don't know the exact point to say that there's an issue, but I would say that if you went into a store and there was a bin full of apples and another bin full of apples, and one sign said these apples were grown in a way where no harm came to any animal, and then the other one said 832 flies died from insecticides, 52 rats, and it had a whole list. And it's like, you can buy whichever apples you want. If they were the same cost, must it not be vegan to buy the ones that cause no harm? If you had the option?
Yeah, I think when you take, we have the option of causing less harm, whatever into equation. Yeah, it would be silly to not buy the one that causes like less harm in some way. But one distinction as well I'd like to make is I still think there's a huge distinction between harm and oppression, which is why I think vegans are so different from carnists in this regard. Because when you go vegan, it's not that you no longer harm animals. I mean, you harm far, far, far fewer than you would obviously if you were a non-vegan. But it's like you no longer oppress them.
Yeah.
It's impossible to go through this world harm-free. You just can't do it.
Oh, definitely.
So this is what, for me, I think veganism is. For me, veganism is about actually avoiding oppressing animals, enslaving them, using them as resources here for humans. Harm is important. I'm not going to completely, I see a lot of vegans make kind of like almost dogmatic statements as if like harm or suffering just isn't factored in at all, as if we just shouldn't at all care about harm and suffering. Of course, harm and suffering is important, but ultimately you can't go through this world without causing harm. So I think we should still massively distinguish harm from oppression and the level of intent to the harm as well. I mean, even our legal system, which is screwed up in many ways in many countries, sees the difference between manslaughter and murder. So with the deer analogy you were making, like that would just be a murder, in my opinion. But I think buying a fucking a kiwi fruit or a lime from the shop, if that was bad and it killed animals, I think it would be manslaughter and not murder. And even that it's like we're doing it through the Carnist system as well. Obviously, we want veganism as well. Part of veganism is we actually want to create a vegan world. Veganic farming, vertical farming, without pesticide use, without the violent thing. If vegans ran the world, all violent crop farming methods would be banned unless it was like extremely impracticable.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And I think that's why we need to work towards getting these good innovations, work towards better things. But until we have them, there still are things that I think we need to look at in terms of what's right and wrong. When I was talking to Vegan Gains and we were talking about the rodenticide thing, because I think it's a fascinating thing to look at. You put rodenticide, a chemical that will attract rats to eat the rodenticide to die. They suffer, bleed out from the inside. They die this horrible, painful death so they won't harm our crops. And Vegan Gains and your average vegan will say, oh, well, they were committing a rights violation to the crop owner. Like they went to do this thing, so you can do this thing. And so that is practically identical to shooting the deer. The rat was going to go consume something, which is why I come up with the deer analogy. The rat wants to go and eat wheat or corn or whatever. And the deer wants to eat the apple, and the human wants to kill the deer to eat the apple, kill the rat to get the corn. And both are fine. Killing that deer is fine if you need the apple. That's why I specified the not needing it. So I just think it's worth thinking about every vegan donut that not only doesn't cause health to a human, but it causes harm to the human's health. That there is likely at very least one death. And now we also have to figure out how much do we care about insects. I don't care anywhere near as much. They're sentient. I wouldn't kill one intentionally, but I might pay for one to be killed depending on which produce I'm buying. But I don't feel comfortable having something like a donut, knowing that I'm killing insects and maybe rodents for it. If I were to do it, it would be based on my addiction to the donut.
The thing with insects is, while we do grant them moral consideration as vegans, hence we don't eat honey and stuff or eat carmine, whatever. Insects are just the most impractical creatures possible to avoid, and I think you can do a name the trait kind of I mean, me buying these fucking headphones probably caused insect. Me living in this house, me walking home today from the shop probably killed insects. I probably stood on insects. Insects are important enough to not exploit, but they're not so important as to basically live your entire existence around avoiding harming. You have to. I mean, maybe I'm being speciesist there by saying that. Maybe they are important as that. But
you should be speciesist,
right? Well, yeah, I see what you're saying, because there are sentience hierarchies and stuff, right? So maybe like we are all speciesists to a certain extent, but basically, if we have a world where we literally can't do anything for fear of like harming insects, we can't have civilization at all. We can't walk anywhere. We can't drive anywhere. We can't have houses. And yeah, as I say, you can trait equalize insects and humans here. You could just say like, if Carson was 1 millimeter long, he couldn't be moved out the way. I couldn't like communicate with him, and like should there be laws against like building this house where Carson might be and a brick might crush him to death, and like it would be absurd, I think, to have the law against killing the 1 millimeter long Carson in that circumstance. But I've got to tell you, I've just found some hilarious Carnists here in the comments section. You've got some funny ones here. Here's one from VL Now who says, "Do you know who this troll is?" VL Now.
I'm familiar with him. Yeah.
He says, "Taste pleasure is a ridiculous vegan term. Do you drink water for taste pleasure? No, you do it because you need it." So I think he's comparing bacon there to water, which is pretty hilarious. And then Garuda Legends says, "I need the nutrients in meat. The taste is just a bonus." Yeah, I'm sure, Garuda Legends, that is exactly why you eat bacon, Frazzles. You need the nutrients in them. You don't do it for taste pleasure at all.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with both these guys, and especially VL Now is very for non-vegan, has some very good, interesting points that I see in comments here and there. But I strongly disagree with that comment that you just read because because that's a thing. It's like taste pleasure is a thing. It exists if you eat something that you know is unhealthy. So that you're doing it for taste. You're doing it because you're essentially addicted to it. It just is what it is. What it is. Yeah.
Carson, I've got to go soon, but did you want to do the Ask the Predators question quick?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. I think it was Angelo was asking me to ask your thoughts on predator culling. So yeah, what are your thoughts on predator culling?
Yeah, so this is an argument that has been brought up in the vegan community really after, I think, Dr. Avi, he kind of brought it to light in like the Discord communities and stuff, and now it's now we have the question of should vegans or should we just not as a society kill predators to reduce rights violations in nature, the suffering it causes? Now here's the thing, and I said this on Has Vegan stream recently because he asked me the same question. If you do the whole name the trait thing with the xenomorph and the lion, I can't name the trait, right? I've been bitten. I completely agree that is logically sound and there's an inconsistency. So, George, would you shoot a xenomorph who is going around murdering humans and they need to do it to survive and it even benefits the ecosystem that they eat these humans? Yes, I would shoot that xenomorph. George, would you shoot a lion because they're doing the exact same thing to gazelles, deers? No, I wouldn't. Okay, name the trait. Boom, you got me. I can't name it, right? I completely understand there's an inconsistency there. My only counter arguments to this is I think it also leads to reductios the other way. So you can do it the other way and you get massive reductios there as well. I mean, for example, a Vegan Gains, he said, when I first made my video just about this idea of killing predators, I mentioned some crazy reductios you'd have in it. Like, let's say, hypothetically, you have a toddler who we have a crystal ball and we know will never be vegan for the rest of their life. Would you shoot that toddler in the head? Vegan Gains was like, yeah, sure, shoot the toddler. I mean, that for me is a reductio, right? So it works the other way, and it leads to the same thing as name the trait does. When you name do MTT on a carnist, they'll end up saying they will Holocaust the mentally disabled. I can't see how this predator culling thing wouldn't also lead to a Holocaust thing of a certain group. You could just say, like, let's say the Jews had this gene where they had to consume animals. Like, would you just round up and kill the Jews? And you could they could keep doing the traits and say, oh, only if they had like the sentience of a deer and stuff. And again, you just get to the whole, you'd Holocaust the mentally disabled. So the reductio, I think, works the other way. And then the other reason, my only other counter argument is that I don't think this is a good look for like the animal rights movement. And carnists are getting on our side about quite a lot of stuff, including in the UK, the whole fox hunting bill, right? About, we want to keep the ban on fox hunting. And many carnists agree this is a bad thing. And this is leading to greater concern for animals because you can actually help draw distinctions. What kind of a world are we going to be creating where it's like we go around murdering like non-herbivorous animals? I mean, this is leading to stuff like you'd have to be talking about shooting little seals and everything. I mean, what kind of fucked up society are
Yeah.
we like creating there?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on almost everything you said, especially that it's a bad look, which is why I don't know. I don't want to give it up as something that I talk about philosophically with friends, fellow vegans, and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I definitely would never want it to be like if I was doing street activism and I was talking to somebody and they said, "Well, what do you think about killing lions or whatever?" I'm like, "Oh, I mean that we don't need to talk about that." I would come up with a way to say like that's the least of my worries. That has nothing to like this is something we can handle. Like that's
It's
yeah.
just out of our control. It's like I'm controlling like the demand of animal foods and stuff each day, and I'm doing activism against that. I do see the whole killing lions thing as an ultimately fruitless thing. I completely understand the
Can I
logic behind
challenge you
it.
on it a little bit?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, so you're in a tree. Let's say it's a tree that has a tree fort, so you don't have to balance. Okay, so you're in a tree with
Yeah,
a tree fort, and you're in Africa, and you have a gun. You have a sniper rifle, and you know how to use it. You can use it well. So a lion's going to get a zebra, and we already know your stance. You're going to let it get the zebra because that's nature. It's doing its thing. Here's the twist. Lion
hmm
gets a zebra, eats the shit out of it. It's so eaten. Lion's not hungry anymore. It needs no more food. Now, this is going to be a rare lion that happens to be born with some mental issues, and it doesn't do what normal lions do, which it chillaxes. It goes up to another zebra and starts maybe torturing it, maybe just kills it. Let's just say it kills it. Let's leave out the torture variable. It
yeah.
kills it and just leaves it there. And let's say we know no other lions are going to come eat it. And then it goes up to another one and kills it. And we can even add in, just for the sake of argument, that this is unheard of. Like that lions don't naturally do this. This lion is just an asshole. It's
Yeah.
not hungry. It needs no food and it kills. Would you take out that individual lion?
So here's the thing. I think I have a consistent and inconsistent answer to this kind of thing because I would actually, I don't know if many people know my position on this. I would actually use whatever force was possible to stop an animal from attacking another animal. So even if a lion was attacking a zebra to eat the zebra, I think it would be ethical in that case to shoot the zebra to stop to shoot the
Oh.
lion to stop the lion from shooting the zebra. And that's actually always been my position since I've been vegan. Now here's why it's kind of consistent as well with my stance on humans, right? But it's inconsistent. I'm inconsistent here, should I just add, because I
Mhm.
wouldn't shoot a lion just roaming around. I'm only shooting a lion once they're doing the attack. Now, here's
Oh.
where I'm inconsistent there, but here's where I am consistent. If I saw a slaughterhouse worker just walking around the street, I wouldn't murder the slaughterhouse worker.
Mm-hmm.
But if an ALF activist broke into a slaughterhouse and put the gun to the slaughterman's head as they're about to stab a pig to death and says,
Let's
"You
end it
fucking
here,
dropped the
George.
knife,"
Let's end it here. No, I'm kidding.
right?
Go on. Go on.
It said you drop the knife now, or I'm going to shoot. And the slaughterhouse worker says, "No, fuck you, I'm going to kill the pig." Yeah, I would support shooting the slaughterhouse worker. So it's it's like I would. It depends if the if they're actually doing the act or not.
Would you want the law to stay consistent and you would just cross your fingers and hope they get away? But if they got caught, would you hope the law holds them accountable because laws are important?
Yeah, that's something I haven't even thought about. As in, like, so say an activist actually did that, should they be done for murder?
Yeah.
Uh, um, from an emotional standpoint, I wouldn't want that activist to be prosecuted because I see them as preventing a murder. I see them
Yeah.
as ultimately as someone doing a good thing in that regard. Do I think there should be? We need some kind of strong law from a logical perspective just to prevent murder from any kind of subjective cases, such as like my own. Um, I mean, I guess it's something I haven't. Yeah, what should happen to that activist who does that? I guess if George ruled the world, like nothing would happen to that activist. But I can
Good.
see why societally you'd probably need
How
some
old were
kind of
you when you
law.
turned vegan?
I was 23.
Okay. Let's say the activist is 22.
Mm.
Or
What's
sorry, not the activist. The slaughterhouse worker is 22.
Yeah, if the slaughterhouse worker is refusing to drop the knife,
Okay,
I
because it's
don't
the
see.
action taking place. Interesting.
Yeah, the guy's about to murder an innocent being. Like, just stop, just use what. Like, if a SWAT team, like, if a guy's holding a knife to a child's throat and the police sniper says drop the fucking
Yeah,
knife, and he says no, and you just start sawing the child's neck, you're going to want him to pull the
yeah.
trigger. I apply the same to a pig. I also apply the same to a zebra.
Okay.
And that'll shoot the lion. But where I'm inconsistent is that I wouldn't shoot a lion walking around, and I wouldn't shoot a slaughterhouse worker just walking down the street.
But would you not advocate for there being patrolmen that are out shooting lions only before they eat their prey? Because I think that's the ultimate idea of predator
Yeah.
culling isn't necessarily just take them out because they're predators.
And this is
Yeah.
and this is I guess another reason I don't support the predator culling position. It just leads to these crazy reductios in the human world. Do I want like a patrol just going around the street saying, "Are you vegan?" No. So it's like,
right.
so I don't want that either, because otherwise
Yeah.
my whole family's about to get murdered. So
Oof. Yeah.
um
Ooh,
yeah.
George, I have to ask you this question.
Go
Now,
on.
in your defense, you're not the only one getting a wild question like this. My buddy Michael had to admit that he would sacrifice his wife to save 10 million chickens, I think it was. Okay, so your family, let's say a family member, a close one, we don't have to specify, is about to, they're a slaughterhouse worker, they're about to kill a cow. Let's say a chicken.
Yeah.
They're about to kill a chicken, and then an activist is there going to kill your family member.
Mm-hmm.
Would you stop that activist?
Yeah, I would, from an emotional
Just from
standpoint, I
emotional.
guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, my dad, who I love very much, he fishes, but like if he is about to like you know, hook a fish out of the water and an activist was about to shoot my dad, I'd stop that activist.
Okay.
Here's the thing, it just leads to like there's so many little with this whole killing predators thing, it opens up a whole fucking can of worms, doesn't it? Of consistencies and inconsistencies.
But it's good it's good to think about it, because then you go, oh man, I
Yeah.
would do this, I wouldn't do this. It's really important for us humans that can have a huge effect on the world to figure out how we feel and why we feel that way.
Yeah. No, I completely see the merit in this in some ways, and then in other ways, it's like, damn, I wish these questions didn't fucking exist. I think, put it this way,
especially if your dad's going to watch the stream.
Right.
All right. No. He heard that no matter how vegan you are, you're going to protect him. Your dad should totally watch the stream.
Maybe he should. Yeah.
Respect there,
Not that I want him to get the idea that fishing is good, because he knows I don't. I stopped fishing with him as soon as I went vegan. I said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. I'm vegan.
Yeah.
But yeah, look. The whole killing predators debate, I completely see the merit in it, in the amount of suffering it would stop. I just think it opens a whole can of worms, and I think the vegan movement is better off without this whole killing predators debate than it is with it. I can't see this doing as much more than actually causing problems. I don't think that something good ultimately is going to come from this.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's only a good that can come in the future. Like, it's something where if we had a vegan world and the future was trying to figure out, okay, what problems do we need to work on? And there'll be all kinds of stuff with like lab grown meat that you can make look like a zebra to put out in the wild for a lion to eat lab grown meat or something. But anyways, I better let you get going, because I think it's pretty late where you're at right now.
Yes, cheers, man. I haven't even eaten dinner yet, so I got to cook. So
I'm gonna stick around and chat with chat, but I'll put up a separate video of just what we did. That way, if you're up for sharing it around and whatnot, that'll be cool. But
yeah, thank you for having this discussion, Carson. I appreciate you putting my brain to work on a lot of these things. Thanks, man. I wish I'd eaten before the stream, so my brain could have been a bit more fueled for the maths and stuff. But no, it's good chat. Cheers, Dad.
Yeah,
dude.
for sure. All right. Take care. See ya.